Hello everyone, Ben here and welcome back to another video. This time we're going to be talking about one-shots and whether or not they should be your introduction into Dungeons and Dragons. As a DM, I do not think a one-shot is the best way to get you started with Dungeons and Dragons. However, as a player, I do. And I think that one-shots for players are a perfect introduction that can really hook you into the game. As a player, again, I would highly recommend jumping into a one-shot as your first game. It'll give you a whistle-stop tour of Dungeons and Dragons and the system involved in playing the game. It's going to show you the basics and introduce you in a system where you can just play around and get used to the game in a low-stakes environment. Now, just to add to this, I would highly recommend starting off with a lower level one-shot, so probably level 2 to 3, honestly, for completely new players, and 2 to 5 for more intermediate players. So level 2 to 5 for intermediate players. Now, why this level range? Well, I feel that level 2 to 3 is a really nice introduction to abilities, spells, equipment, that kind of thing. There's not so much going on that it's going to overwhelm newer players, but there's also not a lack of it. So you're not going to get bored of your abilities. There's going to be plenty to read and plenty to keep you occupied, so you'll be able to learn as you go. When you start branching out into higher levels, especially if you've never played a class before, it can be rather overwhelming of an experience, and seeing just a ridiculous amount of abilities, a stupid amount of spells that you have never seen or heard of before, your face is just going to be glued into your character sheet, just reading what things are as opposed to concentrating and playing the game. You're going to be spoilt for choice when it comes to using abilities, and to be honest, sometimes that isn't a good thing. You know, you want to know what they all do before you come into the game, and just having that sheer amount at your fingertips that you're just unsure about is enough to just kind of shut some people down and stop them from enjoying themselves as much. Communication with the other players as well is, you know, a really good thing to do. Try and talk to them if you can beforehand and just establish why your characters know each other and why they're in this situation together. That can really streamline a game off the bat if you already know why you're together and you're working towards the same goal. One-shots as well are really cool for testing out classes. If you're not entirely certain that you want to play a class for a long haul game, then a one-shot is a really brilliant way of just test driving that character, as long as you are communicative with your DM and your other party members. Other than that, just, you know, find a game that suits you, jump in and have a lot of fun. You can really pick up a lot by doing these one-shots as a player, and they will eventually help you to branch out into a full campaign. Now, as for DMs, there is one main reason that I don't think running a one-shot is particularly conducive to starting off your D&D experience, and that mainly comes down to the pressure that people feel when running their first games. As a DM, it can be daunting enough to kick off a game without having the pressure that this is potentially going to be your one shot to make it work. Now, this can run through people's minds and can stop them from having so much of a fun experience as they should. Now, this all being said, I think that the best way for a DM to first start off with their games is to run a little mini campaign. So plan a one-shot as you would normally do it, but as a DM, instead of focusing it into one game, you should maybe try and focus it into 2 to 4 parts, split them out so that you can actually give yourself time to focus on what you're doing, learn from any mistakes that you make, and just really experience running Dungeons and Dragons properly. A one-shot, like I've said, can just add so much pressure to you that it just becomes unfun. And if your players know that there is more to come as well, so you've split it out over several sessions, they will be a lot more forgiving with your DMing and how you run the game, knowing that, you know, you're going to pick things up here and there, and they know it's your first time if you've told them. They know what to expect. They're not expecting a perfect game. You know, even seasoned veteran TMs don't run perfect games. There's always something to tweak here and there. There's some odd rule that kicks up, and it's all a learning experience. And the best way to do it is not by shoehorning yourself into one game that you feel pressured to finish in one evening, but to run it out over a few sessions, just, you know, so that you can learn from what you're doing and just have a more extended experience. And, you know, by the end of your final session, you'll be far more wealthy in knowledge, having kind of learned from this and that and seen things that you can do differently and things that you want to improve yourself and tweak here and there. you know, you'll have much more knowledge at your fingertips when it comes to running future games, and you will learn from this game in, game out. So at the end of session 1, you'll have far more knowledge going into session 2. At the end of session 2, that will leave you with far more knowledge going into session 3, and so on and so forth. You know, that is the best way I feel to start off with DMing. That's what I did, that's how I kickstarted it, and you know, my mini campaign actually evolved and expanded and turned into the first full campaign that I ran. The players were so engaged and keen on the games, we just kept it going, and I think, how long did we keep going? We kept going for about 8 months, I think. That mini campaign was a real learning experience, as was the rest of that campaign, but it was successful and I learned from my mistakes as I was going on, improved as I went, and ended up with a real cool story about pirates and sea witches. So that's going to bring a close to this short video, and I hope that it helped you to understand a little bit more about how to get into Dungeons & Dragons, mostly as a DM, but also as a player. As a player, you're just going to want to make sure that you have found the right group for you. Attend a session 0. If you're a DM, plan a session 0. This is something that just helps you to establish the wants and expectations of everybody who is going to be playing the game. So whether certain species or classes aren't included in your lore, whether or not there are certain homebrew rules that you want to include. As a player and a DM, it's really important to just establish those before you play. And if you're jumping in with a completely random group, it is even more important. So definitely make sure you are planning in a session 0 as either a DM or a player. So I'm fairly sure that's covered everything that I wanted to talk about. This was only going to be a brief little snippet of a video. So I hope that again you've managed to gain something from this and you are able to jump into playing some Dungeons & Dragons very soon. So I will see you in the next video, and until then, enjoy TTRPGs, and I will catch you in the next one.